Senate Democrats are looking for ways to relieve some of the pressure mounting on them as the result of a government shutdown that has now lasted 29 days. The Democrats are considering proposals to fund food subsidies and pay federal workers. Alexander Bolton, senior staff writer here at The Hill, is out with a new story detailing these deliberations. Hey, Alex, thanks for coming on. I wanted to ask you about these negotiations over paying federal employees. I think it was a surprise to some people to see the union that represents federal employees coming out this week, urging members of Congress to pass a clean CR and end the government shutdown. What impact has that had on Democratic senators?
Well, the statement from Everett Kelly, the president of the American Federation of Government Employees, which represents 820,000 federal workers, I think was a significant break within the Democratic constituency, calling for Democrats to pass that clean CR, arguing that they have already made their point on health care. The strongest reaction I got on Capitol Hill was from Dick Durbin, the Senate Democratic whip, who said that that statement does have impact and that Democrats would be discussing it this week and figuring out what to do. Now, it was a rare moment of truth because, the Democrats have really stuck to their talking points, which is, we're not going to vote for anything to reopen the government until, Republicans negotiate a fix to these rising healthcare premiums. But I think Durbin's moment earlier this week saying that this would have impact and Democrats would take it seriously, I think is interesting and is revealing because it shows that what's critical here is that the Democratic constituency is starting to splinter a little bit on this shutdown, whether it be federal workers who haven't been paid. The shutdown is now in its 29th day. They're about to miss their second paychecks. That's significant. Some of them are really struggling to pay for childcare if they're forced to come to work as essential workers. They're struggling to pay, gas money. They have mortgages, lots of bills. So this is becoming critical for them. And then on another core Democrat constituency are activists, advocates for nutrition assistance, people who advocate for the more than 40 million Americans who are on food stamps. And they say that, if this shutdown drags into next month, people are going to be going hungry. And Democratic senators I've spoken to say they are hearing directly, from these nutrition advocates. And so this is something that they have to be worried about. And that's why Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader, on Tuesday announced that the Senate Democratic Caucus will be coming out with proposals to fund SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, and also WIC, the Women, Infants, Children Nutrition Program during the shutdown. It shows they're feeling pressure and they need to do something about it, although those bills aren't likely to get votes on the Senate floor. So, unless this is resolved soon, it doesn't look like it will be, people are going to be going hungry. They're going to be missing food payments, and they're going to be having to tighten their belts, literally.
So the federal employee union is calling on the Congress to pass this continuing resolution that's now before the Senate, but they're also in the Senate also working at the same time on bills that would pay federal employees. So do Democratic senators think that they may be able to placate the unions by passing this bill and working with Republicans to pay federal employees?
Well, I think this puts them in a really tough spot because what the Republicans are now offering is legislation to pay essential and furloughed federal workers during the shutdown, pay all federal workers during the shutdown, regardless of whether they're required to show up to work or not. Now, last week there was a vote on a Republican bill that would pay only essential workers during the shutdown. That did get some critical Democratic support. You had John Ossoff, the Democrat from Georgia, Raphael Warnock, the Democrat from Georgia, and John Fetterman, the Democrat from Pennsylvania. They all voted for it. And now the Democrats, when they opposed that last week, argued that, look, we can't be picking and choosing which federal workers get paid. Well, now the Republicans have made a new offer, which is let's pay everybody. And I think that becomes very tough for the Democrats to continue to say no to when they're getting pressure from the federal workers union. Now, what the Democrats are saying, and the lead negotiator for the Democrats is Chris Van Hollen, who represents many federal workers as a senator from Maryland. They're saying, well, we can't agree to this because it doesn't have a prohibition on Trump attempting mass layoffs or reductions in force during the shutdown. But, the thing is that this is the reductions in force, the mass layoffs, they're already in the courts. So, I think it's somewhat unreasonable to expect that Republicans are going to accept, a major restriction on Trump's power here. They're offering something very tempting, which is, help these people who aren't getting paychecks and may not get paychecks up until Thanksgiving. Help them pay their bills. And so, the Democrats are resistant right now, but a number of Democrats I spoke to on Capitol Hill yesterday, Mark Kelly, Tim Kaine, Mark Warner, Bernie Sanders, they say they're willing to look at a proposal being pushed by the Republicans to pay all federal workers.
You talked about SNAP benefits. There's also this program that helps provide nutrition assistance to pregnant mothers and their children. What are Democrats going to do there? There is a bill from Senator Hawley, Republican from Missouri, to at least deal with the SNAP benefit aspect of that. Are they working with Democrats? And you also mentioned that that's likely not to get a vote. Is that because the White House doesn't want Republican senators to pass these individual bills? They want to hold the line on the full CR?
Well, the Hawley bill deals with SNAP, and right now it has only one Democrat co-sponsor. That's Peter Welch of Vermont. Now, what Schumer says the Democrats are come up with is an alternative proposal that deals with both SNAP and WIC. WIC is the Women, Infants, Children program that assists pregnant mothers, as you pointed out. So the Democrats want to go with a broader bill, but neither is likely to reach the floor unless something changes. Vice President J.D. Vance was here on Capitol Hill yesterday. He met with Senate Republicans at lunch and told them that these limited bills to fund portions of the government should not be passed. The White House views, Speaker Mike Johnson, the House views these bills as something that are likely to prolong the shutdown because it eases the pain points. As I pointed out at the start of this interview, Democrats are under some intense pressure here because of the pain being felt by federal workers, because of the pain that will be felt next month by the more than 40 million Americans who are on SNAP, who the pregnant women who rely on WIC. So the White House view is that if you fund these programs during the shutdown, you make it easier for the Democrats to hold on to their position, which is keeping the government shut down. So the White House doesn't want any relief here. I think initially the Senate Republicans were open to funding some elements of government during the shutdown, like SNAP, for instance, like air traffic controllers. Now that's shifting because the White House is putting pressure on the Senate Republicans not to ease any of the pain points. And while it's painful for both Republicans and Democrats, the White House calculus is that it's the Democrats who need to be broken here, even if it hurts some Republicans in the process. So it's a pretty brutal game of brinkmanship right here.
You also have House Speaker Johnson saying he's not going to bring the House back to pass any of these standalone bills as well. I wonder, though, if you think that Democrats are kind of hurting their negotiating position by talking about funding any of these standalone bills. I mean, they're saying that they're holding out on this government funding situation because they want to pass extensions to these healthcare subsidies.
I don't think the Democrats are really hurting their position by, funding SNAP, for instance. I mean, SNAP is not a Republican priority. WIC is not a Republican priority. I mean, Republicans are talking about it as though they are priorities, but traditionally these are Democratic priorities. So to fund Democratic priorities during a shutdown, you still have many Republican priorities unfunded. So I don't think that removes their leverage. Now, I think what's interesting is the issue of federal worker pay. That could undermine their leverage because if you do agree to the Republican proposal to pay all federal workers essential and furloughed during the shutdown, then you really take the pressure off Trump because he doesn't have to worry about paying members of the military. He doesn't have to worry about paying air traffic controllers. And then the president can keep those programs that he doesn't care that much about, like I don't know, the IRS or the EPA or things like that. He can keep them furloughed indefinitely, while the things he does care about, he can get up and running. He can designate them essential. They will get paid so they can move forward. So I think that's a big reason why the Democrats don't want to pay the federal workers. They feel that undermines their leverage with the president because it allows the president to pay the workers who are upholding his top priorities, whether it be defense, homeland security, air traffic safety. I think that's more where the Democrats are leery of losing their leverage.
From a kind of 30,000 foot view, how do you think Democrats are weighing the pressure to hold the line on the shutdown versus the harm that is accumulating?
That is a good question, and I think that that is something they're wrestling with right now because you can argue that they have gotten this healthcare issue, this healthcare premium issue out there. It is being discussed. It is front and center. I mean, that is why I go back to that statement by Everett Kelly, president of the Federal Workers Union. He says, the parties have made their points. So what can they really expect to achieve now? And by the way, they want an extension of these ACA subsidies. This is not something that they're going to be able to negotiate, in a matter of days. This is going to be a prolonged negotiation. So what are we talking about? Keeping the government shut down until Christmas, and so that we can work out this kind of complex extension of ACA subsidies? Do they expect a complete capitulation from Republicans on ACA subsidies when the Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House? I mean, that seems unrealistic to me. So that's why this has dragged on for so long. I think the Democrats don't have a very realistic expectation of what the Republicans will actually, concede to them, and so I think the Republicans are banking on the idea that this shutdown, the longer it goes on, will become increasingly unpopular, and the Democrats will start to take the brunt of the blame, because they are the ones that, in the end, are blocking these clean continuing resolutions. So, I mean, as much rhetoric as they throw out there, the clean continuing resolutions are being blocked repeatedly by the Democrats, and I think the Republican calculation is at some point, the public is going to really turn on the Democrats here. Now, I think what the Democrats have going for them is that they are known as a party of government, and so there's kind of a built-in trust factor that they don't want to that they want what's best for government and government services. So that is why they have continued to do fairly well in the polls. But the longer this goes on, really. The reality is that the reality is that Democrats are demanding a major policy concession on a clean short-term funding bill. I mean, this is exactly what Ted Cruz of Texas did in 2013 when he demanded repeal of Obamacare to fund the government. I mean, the Democrats are very resolute in saying that is, was a complete abuse of the filibuster power, and that's kind of, ironically, that's now what they're trying to do. So I don't know. I mean, I just don't see the Republicans giving any ground here. I think it's a matter of the Democrats caving at some point. Now, and what they're looking for is a face-saving off-ramp so they can claim some kind of victory here. And what that will be, we're going to find out, and it's probably going to be something pretty small.
Yeah, that's what my next question was actually going to be, is like, what could the Democrats frame as a victory that they could sell to their base? Because surely they would get criticized heavily by the base if they're just seen as giving up after all this.
I think what they can claim as victory is we kicked Trump's butt with the shutdown. We showed him that being contemptuous of Congress, being contemptuous of the Democratic Party hurt him because he's in charge of the country, and things completely broke down. Republicans, learned a tough lesson here, which is, they can't govern without us. And so, we're going to take this in the next year and things will be different. I mean, I'm speculating here, but I think ultimately that's where they're going to, the way they're going to spin this is that, look, we took it to Trump, we punched him in the mouth, and he's sorry that he messed with us. I mean, I don't see anything else. I do not see Trump agreeing to, a major extension of enhanced Obamacare subsidies when the vast majority of Republicans in both House and Senate, are not fans of that. The Republican Party has been against Obamacare, for how many years now? 17 years. I mean, it's sort of a fantasy to think that the Democrats are really going to win a major policy concession here. But let's keep in mind, they're playing to their base, and their base loves this shutdown. The base loves that Trump is, being put through the ringer here, even though the president has made every effort to kind of detach himself from this and to make it seem like he doesn't care. So I don't know. It's a very difficult situation to predict how it's going to end, because we haven't seen anything like this, during my career covering Washington and even before that.
Yeah, and I guess if you end the shutdown and then all the focus turns to these ACA subsidies, and you can say, see, we brought all the attention here, and the Republicans are going to have to figure out whether or not they want to negotiate on that. That could be sold as a win, but I can imagine there's going to be a large chunk of the Democratic base that is not happy, which maybe that's always the case. But we'll leave it at that. Alexander Bolton, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.